Hello, and thank you for joining us for the second episode of the Green Sofa Dialogues. Today we'll be looking at how hydrogen empowers the energy transition, and we'll be asking our two guests, is hydrogen the missing key technology needed to realize an integrated energy transition? Joining me today are Claude Turmes, who is the Minister for Energy and the Minister for Spatial Planning in Luxembourg, and Michèle Azalbert, who is the CEO of the Renewable Hydrogen Business Unit at ENGIE in France. And I'd like to dive right into our conversation today and ask both of you a question. What role does hydrogen play in maintaining European and climate environmental objectives? Claude, would you like to start the conversation?
Yes, so hydrogen will play a role. If we look to the 2050 net zero carbon scenarios in Europe, it will have a role of, I would say, 10, 15 to 20% of the supply. All the rest will be electricity. So we have to be aware that the number one carrier of the energy transition is electricity. Electricity is basically there. The infrastructure is there. The fact that PV and wind have very positive cost curves makes it possible to have a very quick green electrification. So we can kick out coal and nuclear from the system. Plus, we can and gas will also be reduced. And the main will be wind onshore. There will be a lot of wind offshore, which is a very stable 4,000 to 5,000 hours a year source. And we will have PV, decentralized, small, but also larger scale, utility scale PV. So this electrification will be the number one in energy transition. For example, also for transport, the cars. The CEO of VW and the CEO of Tesla, I think these people have thought long about what will be the carrier for the zero emission car, and it is electricity. It's not hydrogen. So hydrogen will play a role in certain markets. Probably the first one will be steel, refineries, fertilizer, so big industrial processes where basically you have no other solution than to use hydrogen. And then we have to see in this, which is also a competition between, is electricity the more probable carrier or hydrogen, who will basically make it. We know from the research teams of Mercedes and Volvo and Scania that the producers of lorries believe more, at least today, in electric lorries than in hydrogen lorries. So hydrogen will play a role, but a much smaller role than the direct electrification. So that's one. Then the second is producing hydrogen from fossil, even fossil gas, doesn't help us in the main problem which we have to solve, which is climate change. So the only hydrogen which makes sense is renewable hydrogen. Mm-hmm. And the one thing where basically I hope that we will not burn too much of taxpayers' money is now throwing millions into hydrogen from gas, so reformation of gas into hydrogen, and then hoping that we can dig this down somewhere with carbon capture and storage. This is expensive, and above all, this will be marginal, and it will not help us in innovation, because the real innovation in hydrogen is electrolyzers powered by renewables. So I don't see, I don't want to see a big role for gas reformed hydrogen, because it doesn't help us in climate change, and it doesn't help us in the innovation chain neither. And then the third thing is, where will renewable hydrogen will be produced? Will it be in Europe? Will it be on other places? And I think also there we have to be realistic. So in this moment, I'm with my team, I try to analyze what will be Luxembourg's role. And basically the conclusion is Luxembourg will not be a producer of green hydrogen because our PV and wind is too expensive with all the losses we have in electrolysis then to produce competitive green hydrogen. So there will be certain places in Europe where hydrogen will be competitive. Portugal, maybe Spain, a bit of northern Sweden, Norway, where you have extremely cheap wind, maybe offshore wind, but even that could be too costly in a global competition. And then, of course, you have countries like Morocco, Middle East, Argentina, where you have Chile, where you have very cheap renewables. And I think ENGIE, if I'm well informed, is one of the companies who shares that analysis because they are active in Australia, in Chile, so in the places where the competitivity to produce renewable-based hydrogen is probably the best.
Thank you very much. So, Michèle, this is a great pass to you. Is green the solution?
Definitely, renewable hydrogen has a key role to play in the energy transition, especially to reach the Paris Agreement target. And let me give you a recent quote from a Barclays report I read recently. Due to the lockdown of the COVID crisis, a cut of 8% of the global emission have been registered in this period of time. And should we keep this practice each year, it will allow us to reach the Paris target. So it gives us a sense of the collective effort we need to make in order to reach the target. So clearly, renewable energies have a key role to play. And among these energy, renewable hydrogen. I am fully aligned with what Claude said, and I won't repeat, but to summarize, renewable in the energy system and also energy efficiency, they go together. It will contribute to reduce the carbon footprint, not only of the energy, the power production, but also road transport with electric cars, and also heating. Also, it's feasible. Secondly, the hard-to-abate sector, chemical industry, and also heavy-duty mobility. Hydrogen has a key role to play to reduce the emission of transport like trains, ships, and also planes. Definitely a role to play. And lastly, storage. Hydrogen, we see the role that renewable hydrogen has to play in storage, because we will have to address the question of intermittent energy. And also we will have to address the question of also variable demand. So at the end of the day, hydrogen is a fit-for-purpose solution to address this question of the balancing of the energy system. So in a nutshell, it will really contribute to the decarbonation of the whole energy system. And then the idea is then, based on this anchor of large demand, to develop a solution for other type of uses like mobility, injection into the gas network, storage, so many other type of uses. So at the end of the day, the approach is to develop some sort of hubs, local hubs for territories, and then the hydrogen could be produced in these hubs and then transported to the end user. And ultimately, also, it could be connected to the transportation pipe to create and benefit from additional flexibilities. So these hubs, aggregating many uses, will allow economies of scale, offer cost-competitive solution, and will allow also to mitigate risk, because you have very different type of consumption profile, and at the end of the day, gives additional flexibility. And beyond, I would say, this vision, we are already in action, and we are already developing a solution as I already described. So developing solutions for industrial uses, for chemicals like fertilizer, and also for refinery and for the steel industry. In the Netherlands, in the north of the Netherlands, in Eemshaven, we are developing a solution together with GasUnie to produce green methanol. And at the end of the day, it's for the local industry to start with, but it's also the objective is to irrigate the whole territory and beyond, also the north of the Netherlands, go to Germany also. In Australia, we are developing together with Yara a solution to produce green fertilizer in order to decarbonize step by step the production of the unit in the north of Australia. And another example concerning heavy-duty mobility, and I will take the example of mines. We are already in action together with Anglo-American in their mine in South Africa. And the first step is to completely retrofit a truck and to fuel it with renewable hydrogen. So a truck is a 1 megawatt fuel cell capacity, and it's a 3 more or less megawatt of renewable power to produce the full fuel for one truck. So it gives you a sense of, I would say, at the end of the day, the size that you can reach in a mine, and develop a solution for this kind of ecosystem, where you can also, in the very short term, be competitive already the alternative carbonized solution, which is diesel to propel the truck. And we are active together with plenty of partners and among other Alstom in the Netherlands, whereby we tested a train, a hydrogen train in the Groningen region during a few days, and it was fueled with renewable hydrogen, and it went pretty well, so meaning that it will pave the way for orders for the Groningen region. So it's this kind of approach, aggregation of uses, chemical industry, trains, so it gives you a sense of what we are trying to build. Mm-hmm. And also we are starting to develop solutions for the maritime sector. Last, also injecting hydrogen, renewable hydrogen, also in a gas grid, be it a distribution grid or the transportation grid in France. So demonstrators have been developed. It has been technically proved. So meaning now the idea is to deploy and replicate this solution where it makes sense. So it all depends from one territory to another, depending on their appetite, be it for storage solution or be it for solution to inject into the gas grid. So we see clearly renewable as a new clean fuel and a zero carbon solution for territories and beyond, and I will repeat myself, beyond CO2 emission reduction, it can also, and more importantly, it will boost the local economies, because we are developing solutions for territories. It will create new jobs, and it will also help to maintain the existing one, because we are preparing the existing industry for the future by decarbonizing this industry.
Thank you. Claude, from where you're sitting, can you think of further technical solutions? And in addition to that, what can we do to implement a political but also a regulatory framework that can support research and innovation on the clean hydrogen front?
So I think the first thing which we have to do is we have to define what kind of hydrogen do we want to see. Mm-hmm. And in order not to divert money, which is always scarce, into investments who are basically stranded and which will not in the long run really help us. So my fight at this moment is to make sure that we have traceability, so that we know which source is at the basis of hydrogen, and that we concentrate basically our public money on green hydrogen, and green hydrogen being renewable hydrogen. And I don't want to see public money going to gas, fossil produced hydrogen. And maybe one question back to Michèle, in your internal company trade-off, ENGIE is part, was merged together and then rebranded, and one big part was Gaz de France. So how do you trade off internally between probably part of ENGIE, the gas part of ENGIE, who says no, fossil gas has a future through hydrogen, and then the renewable part of ENGIE who says, who will probably say, look, it's about renewable hydrogen because that is the only hydrogen which makes sense from climate change. And the other question which I try to get a feeling is, I think that size matters. So what is the size of an electrolyzer where basically you start? So, and of course I see your point with you have a remote mine where it is very, very costly to bring diesel to a remote place, and therefore the diesel is not at the price I can buy diesel in a filling station in Luxembourg. So because I'm pretty sure that your 3 megawatt wind turbine with a very small electrolyzer and then producing green hydrogen for 1 megawatt track, I think that will be probably much, much more costly than diesel costs today in Europe. So, which brings me back to the question of what is reasonably competitive. And I'm not against taking public money to do early investments which are not profitable. But on the other hand, I think from a system approach, I want to understand where will hydrogen happen at the end, hydrogen production from renewables. And my best guess is that it will happen in the territories where you have cheap or wind, or where you have cheap PV, and then you have territories like Portugal, like Morocco, maybe some Argentina, Australia, Chile, where you have both PV, and then of course you have an ideal place to do it, because you have steady renewables at euro per megawatt hour. So isn't that isn't that what we need? So to be realistic and not to come up with projects which will cost so it's 30 to 50 euro per megawatt hour, or 3 to 5 cents per kilowatt hour, or because if I go to any territory like in Luxembourg, I would probably I will need 100, 110, 120 to get PV producing hydrogen, and then the green hydrogen will just be too expensive. So what's your analysis from a company point?
Thank you, Claude, for your question, and very good question we are having also. To start with, to answer to the first one, within ENGIE, for sure, we are also a gas company. And then the question is, how do we approach also our existing portfolio of assets and carbonize our fossil asset? Clearly, the ambition of ENGIE is to decarbonize its own portfolio of assets. With regard to gas, we fully believe in green gases. And within green gases, we for sure have renewable hydrogen, but also biogas. And in addition, also, the question is also how to decarbonize our own production asset. So we are tackling all these questions in parallel. And for instance, to give you an example, for the gas transport business we're having within ENGIE, the question we address today is the question of the greenification of the pipes and the combination of biogas plus renewable hydrogen, and how will we achieve it, practically speaking, in terms of available quantity of biogas and renewable hydrogen. So this is the kind of question we are having today, but clearly we are engaged into the energy transition, and to start with our own portfolio of assets. We fully believe in renewable hydrogen. The reason why we have created 3 years ago a business unit dedicated to that, to develop the business. And here we have a challenge for the hydrogen business. At the same time, we have to develop cost competitive, I would say, electrolyzer also inside, there is also the question of the scale-up in order to reduce the cost of the solution. And also the question of the increase of the efficiency of the electrolyzer and the fuel cell. It will clearly significantly weigh on the total cost of the solution, because this part of the solution, the hydrogen-based solution, the electrolyzer represents, I would say, around 40% of the total cost of the solution. The second part, which weighs on the total cost of the solution, is renewable energy. And clearly, in order to be in a position to propose in the short term the most cost-competitive solution, our choice within ENGIE is to start developing solutions in countries where you have very favorable renewable energy. The reason why Australia is among the countries, but also Chile and also Europe, especially the north of Europe with abundant wind, but also the south of Europe and the north of Africa also.
And what if I just to be precise, at what production cost? So ENGIE is a professional company. You will come with a project, and then you will have the risk manager, and the risk manager will say to you, look, if renewables have less running hours as X and more costs as Y, then you are not allowed to do the project. So you don't give us all the secrets from ENGIE, but give us a bit of an orientation. At which cost would you still say that makes sense?
It starts, first of all, with the willingness to partner to engage in the development of this solution. I mentioned Yara, for example, in Australia. They are willing to decarbonize their process. So then the idea is altogether to find a way to develop the most cost-competitive solution. However, in the early years, the support is needed in order to make it bankable, for sure. But the approach is to design it in a technical manner so that at the end of the day, the total cost of the solution is as low as possible. You can then play on many levels. You can optimize the nature of renewable energy you use. And if you combine wind with solar, you optimize then the efficiency of the electrolyzer, the utilization rate of the electrolyzer, and then you bring the cost of hydrogen down. You can also play with batteries to optimize the profile of renewable energy. And also you can optimize on the cost of storage. This is another important piece in the global solution. And the last one is also the downstream asset. The more flexibility you have on the downstream asset, the lower the total cost of the solution is. So what we do in a co-development approach with our partner, which would be the off-taker, is to optimize this design. And then is to engage also with public bodies in order to find a way to support the development of this solution in the early years, because we are aligned all together on the fact that it has a meaningful role, I would say, to play in the local territories. It will start, in our view, again with large off-takers in order to optimize again the cost of the solution, but it goes already well beyond, because it's also a solution for mobility in the nearby. It could be also a solution, the same solution for other chemical uses in the nearby. So it's a way we approach it in order to, again, develop altogether a meaningful solution that requires as less as possible support in the early years.
I could basically, you should be in policy, because when I ask you a question, you don't answer the question, which policymakers are really good in. So, but where roughly you would put that cutoff, where you would say the renewable sources in that area are too expensive and it doesn't make sense?
It's a combination. It's not only the renewable sources, but I would say it's also the total cost of the solution. For instance, if I take the north of Europe, there are plenty of offshore wind. Potential of offshore wind is very important. Then the question is, then how do you transport the electrons from the production basin, which is in some cases very far from the consumption basis? And here you start then to compare the alternative solution. And in some cases, the best way again to transport electron and large quantity of electron to the consumption area is gas. So then you can develop a meaningful solution using hydrogen. And beyond,
so basically, which would mean that when it comes to offshore in the North Sea, you would foresee to take the electrons from the offshore wind, which is out in the sea, and produce it in the sea, so to have an electrolyzer standing on a platform or an artificial island, whatever, that be more competitive than which is the alternative, yes. Which is to have a cable.
And then it's maybe yes, for sure. And we are studying, I would say, decentralized and centralized the production of hydrogen based on offshore wind. But at the end of the day, it's not only that. The second layer is that, okay, just for the transport, it could be meaningful with hydrogen. In some cases, it could be a little bit, I would say, more expensive. However, at the end of the day, if you then add the value it could bring to the nearby industry in the port area, then it's a full value of the solution. And then it's a cost optimization at the end of the day. And if you integrate all that, and it's a cross-sector approach, then all in all, the solution as such is meaningful. So for me,
but I think we need also, as a policymaker, I need to understand, for example, we have in 2 weeks' time, we have our meeting of the North Sea ministers, where Luxembourg is through the Benelux also a part of. So one of the questions we are discussing between ministers are the electrolyzers, which would transform electrons from offshore wind into green hydrogen. Will they stand in the port of Rotterdam, or will they stand outside in the sea? And good.
Yes.
Today I would say, because also knowing how expensive transformators are when they stand on an artificial island, an electrolyzer is a very, very big transformator. So today my best guess would be it's cheaper to build it in the port of Rotterdam and to bring the cable to the port of Rotterdam than to foresee an electrolyzer on pylons somewhere out in the sea with seawater, with all the difficulties when it's rough, you can't maintain every day. So I think we have to be realistic also about what is possible and what is not possible.
Yes, clearly, and I think there is no one size fits all solution. And at the end of the day, the beauty of hydrogen is that you can transport large quantity of energy over a very long distance. And studies have been made in Australia, for instance, to demonstrate that the best way is to use it to transform electron into gas, to transport it over very long distances. And the beauty also of it is that the speed at which hydrogen moves into a pipe is more than 3 times higher compared to the speed at which gas, methane, move into a pipe. So at the end of the day, you have to integrate all the benefits. And my main message is that it's important to view it from a global perspective. And if you add all the value, at the end of the day, it may be as competitive as the alternative solution that you may have in order to decarbonize a certain sector.
Yes. Claude, would you be able to comment for me on, so Germany just came up, published their hydrogen strategy. Can you comment on it?
I have read through it. I also had a phone call with Peter Altmaier last week, so I think it's a good move. I think it's important that Germany, as a big industrial player in Europe, has ambition also in the whole hydrogen economy around electrolyzers and so on. I think and Germany has also basically moved to the direction of it is renewable hydrogen, everything else doesn't really make sense. So the one question which is, of course, still not completely defined, but maybe it's not so easy to define, is where will the renewables stand, which will fuel green hydrogen, which will be consumed in Germany. So will it be electrons from massive investments into offshore wind both in the Baltic Seas and in the North Sea, or will Germany be largely an importer of green hydrogen from Chile, Australia, Morocco, you name them? So I think for me, this question of where is the edge where we are competitive, I think is important. And I would be, of course, it would be fabulous for us as Europeans if offshore wind could be competitive, because it is in volume, it is such a large scale. So that would be, of course, great. And then we could combine it with the places where we have good onshore and offshore. So with Peter Allmeyer, I think we are now very curious what Commission will propose probably today. And then, so the focus should be renewable hydrogen. And then, of course, we need to see how can we place Europe, on one hand, on the industrial policy side of are we able to produce electrolyzers, other devices? And then, of course, I think I want Europe to be very, very active in formatting a world renewable hydrogen market. And for that, we need to first and rapidly come up with a definition of, so we have to define green hydrogen. We need to ensure that we have a traceability system which is robust. And 1 year ago, when we had a discussion with the energy ministers on foreign energy, so policy, the foreign policy dimension of energy policy, some suggested that the oil market should one day be traded in euro and not in dollar, or the gas market. Basically, I'm not optimistic at all that will happen. But where I'm optimistic is, if Europe gets as EU its acts together, we could be the trendsetter, the front runner to formate a renewable-based hydrogen world market through tendering quantities along certain criteria on how it should be produced, and that could bring us into a front-runner position.
On my side, I'm very optimistic with the Clean Hydrogen Alliance. In my view, it will be a key milestone to support the development of renewable hydrogen at European level. It is to be launched very soon on July 8th. And it's clearly a multi-stakeholder approach, a cooperation platform, including member states and also industrial partners, research organization. And clearly the objective is to make the European industry a global frontrunner in clean hydrogen. And the objective is to propose a strategic development plan with concrete industrial rollout, with concrete measure. So I'm very, very optimistic on that, and I very much welcome the hydrogen strategy to be published, but also the smart energy sector integration strategy to be published very soon. And we hope that we will find in this strategy the implementation of measures, regulation, tools, but also roadmap for decarbonation of the energy system. Within ENGIE, we believe that on the supply side, we need a mechanism like a contract for difference to support the renewable hydrogen on a temporary basis in the early years and to compensate for the competitiveness gap between carbonated and decarbonated solution. And on the demand side, we think that it would be great also to introduce specific targets for industry and also for mobility, specific target whereby a certain percentage of renewable hydrogen or low carbon hydrogen could be used in the industry. And for mobility, a certain percentage of buses, garbage trucks and fleets fueled by hydrogen. And lastly, also to develop a roadmap for the decarbonation of the energy system followed by concrete action again, such as the traceability system, like guarantee of origin, because it's very important to know the quantum of CO2 emission the product you're buying is having. And also set a potentially target of injection into the gas network in order to support the demand to create a long-term offtake, again in the early years. And implement storage obligation, because we think within ENGIE that the more renewable you put in the system, the more flexibility you need to develop within the system. And it's important to start implementing additional storage. And the last point on my side I would like to make on public support is that clearly today there is a collective willingness to act, collective also willingness to support financially the development of hydrogen with stimulus packages, also implemented in Europe but beyond, with a lot of billion announced, and where hydrogen is also tagged as such. But for me, in my view, the very important step is to move quickly in the short term. We need to speed up. We need to simplify the access to public support and to start on a project already, a concrete project. Potentially, in my view, what is important is to start with large-scale project, because if we really want to deliver on the emission cut, it's now, and it's important to move quickly and to start with a large-scale project. I would say in consortium, be it private only or be it public and private consortium, and with the concrete project already developed now. And the faster we will go, the better, because at the end of the day, we will put less money in the system if we start at scale now. And I think also it's important to move quickly, because I would say it would be a pity to have to wait for another health crisis to happen to really accelerate.
No, and I pretty much agree that we have to act quick. We should act at scale, and we should prevent basically making around these first investments. And in that sense, if ENGIE could also help us really to concentrate the public investment on renewable-based hydrogen and not go this what I consider a dead end, which is gas reformed hydrogen. I think that will help, because otherwise the NGOs, I think also even a lot of financial analysts will say, look, but should we really pour money into something which at the end will not be helping us in the real fight, which is winning against climate change? And in that sense, I think ENGIE is a company who is from the majors, who was probably the first. I think it's your personal merit, but it's also Thierry, who I think at the time really moved ENGIE to understand that hydrogen, green hydrogen, will be the new gas in a certain sense. So I think ENGIE is well placed, and we as policymakers and the companies should now be concrete in order to put Europe on the world map when it comes to renewable-based hydrogen.
Thank you both so much for your time. I wanted to thank you for your engagement and your willingness to dialogue with one another. You made my job really easy today. And for everyone watching, I hope that you will join us next time when we talk about green finance and green recovery. Thanks. Bye.
Goodbye. Thank you very much.
Bonne journée.